I was sitting in my home studio, the familiar mess of canvas prints scattered across the floor, tech monitors glowing faintly in the dim light, and half-finished projects leaning against the walls. My fingers were smudged with paint from messing around earlier, and the air smelled like turpentine and coffee. It was a normal Thursday afternoon, or so I thought. Then my phone buzzed on the desk, cutting through the quiet hum of the room. I glanced down, expecting a text from Clara nagging me about picking up groceries or something. Instead, it was a notification from Forbes. My heart stopped for a second as I read the headline. Forbes billionaire list. Meet the reclusive digital art mogul behind a $5.1 billion NFT empire. And there it was, my name, in bold, staring back at me like some kind of surreal joke. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and read it again. Public. Out there. No going back now. The weight of it hit me slowly, like water seeping into cracked ground. For 12 years, I'd kept this life hidden, my real life, not the one everyone thought I had. My wife, Clara, her parents, Gerald and Margaret, her whole family, they all saw me as the struggling artist, the guy barely scraping by on odd jobs and hobby projects. I let them think that. It was easier that way. Less explaining, less arguing. But now the mask was off, and I could feel the ground shifting under me. On the desk next to my phone sat a gold-lettered invitation, fancy and crisp, for the family reunion happening in 2 days at Gerald and Margaret's sprawling estate. I'd been dreading it for weeks. Clara had even pulled me aside yesterday, her voice sharp as she said, "Please, just don't embarrass the family this time." She'd meant don't show up in my paint-stained jeans, don't ramble about art no one cared about, don't give her dad another reason to look down his nose at me. I'd nodded, kept my mouth shut, like always. But now, with that Forbes alert glaring up at me, everything felt different. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. How was this even happening? I mean, I knew it was coming eventually. Jules, my assistant, had warned me last month that the magazine was sniffing around my business. She's brilliant like that, always 2 steps ahead, with her deadpan voice and ruthless way of handling things. "They're on to you," she'd said over the phone, no emotion, just fact. "Your anonymous days are numbered." I'd shrugged it off then, told her to keep the jet on standby and the island prepped, just in case. But seeing it live, seeing my name tied to billionaire and mogul, it felt like someone had kicked the legs out from under my chair. Clara didn't know. Her parents didn't know. None of them did. For 12 years, I played the part they wanted me to play. The broke dreamer married to their perfect daughter, the guy they pitted at every holiday dinner. I drove a beat-up old truck, wore clothes that looked like I'd pulled them from a thrift store bin, let them pick up the tab when we went out. Why? Because every time I tried to tell them about my work, about blockchain, NFTs, the digital galleries I was building, they'd laughed or rolled their eyes. "That's cute," Gerald had said once, patting my shoulder like I was a kid with a lemonade stand. So I stopped trying. I built it all in secret instead. Now the secret was out, and I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. I picked up the phone again, scrolling through the article. It had everything. My first NFT dropped 12 years ago, the anonymous platform I'd launched that took off like wildfire, the licensing deals, the acquisitions. They even had a photo of me from some random conference I'd spoken at years back, one I'd forgotten about. Reclusive, they called me. I guess that was true. I'd stayed out of the spotlight, kept my head down, let the work speak for itself. But $5.1 billion? That number stared back at me, cold and real. I'd known I was doing well, hell. I'd bought a private island last year, hadn't I? But seeing it laid out like that made it feel bigger, heavier. And the timing couldn't have been worse. 2 days from now, I'd be walking into that reunion, facing Clara's family with no way to hide anymore. I set the phone down and ran my hands through my hair, trying to think. Clara would see this soon, if she hadn't already. Her phone was always buzzing with news alerts. She loved keeping up with the world, loved knowing things before everyone else. What would she say? What would she do? Just last night, we'd been in the kitchen, her chopping vegetables for dinner while I pretended to help. She'd sighed, loud and dramatic, and said, "I wish you'd figure out something stable, you know? My parents keep asking when you're going to grow up." I just smiled, nodded, let it roll off me like I always did. Stable. She had no idea. And her parents, God, Gerald and Margaret were the worst. Old money types, stiff and judgmental, always acting like I was some charity case they'd taken in by letting me marry their daughter. Margaret with her fake smiles, Gerald with his lectures about real work. They'd spent years looking at me like I was nothing. And now? Now they'd have to eat every word. I stood up, pacing the studio, my boots scuffing against the hardwood floor. The invitation caught my eye again, sitting there all smug and proper. 2 days. 2 days until I'd walk into that reunion, and they'd all know. Part of me wanted to call Jules right then, tell her to fire up the jet and fly me somewhere far away, maybe the island, where I could sit on the beach and let this blow over. But another part of me, the bigger part, wanted to see their faces. I wanted to watch Gerald's smug grin falter, watch Margaret's pearls tremble as she clutched them, watch Clara try to figure out how she'd missed this for 12 years. I'd been invisible to them, a shadow in their perfect little world. But not anymore. The truth was out, and it was mine to own. I stopped pacing, grabbed my phone, and texted Jules, "It's live. Plan reveal starts now." Her reply came back in seconds, short and sharp like always. On it. I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline start to pump. This was it. The mask was off, and I was ready to step into the light. I was still reeling from the Forbes alert, my phone sitting heavy in my hand, when it buzzed again. This time, it wasn't some news app. It was Franklin, Clara's brother, calling me. I stared at the screen for a second, his name flashing like a warning sign. Franklin was the loud one in the family, always joking, always poking at me for being the starving artist. I figured he'd seen the article by now. No way he'd miss something this big. I swiped to answer, holding the phone to my ear as I leaned against my desk, the clutter of my studio pressing in around me. "Hey, Franklin," I said, keeping my voice steady, like nothing was different. "You seriously on Forbes?" He blurted out. No hello. No warm-up. Just straight to it. His voice was high, almost squeaky, like he couldn't believe it. "Billionaire? Are you in witness protection or something? What's going on, man?" I could hear the panic in his tone, the way he was scrambling to make sense of it. I let out a small laugh, more to myself than to him. "Yeah, it's me," I said simply. "No witness protection. Just me." There was a long pause on his end, like he was waiting for me to say it was a prank. When I didn't, he let out a low whistle. "Holy crap," he muttered. "Clara's gonna lose her mind. You know that, right?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. My eyes flicked to my phone screen as a text popped up, "Clara." Just a link to the Forbes article in 3 words. What the hell? No emojis, no questions, just that. Sharp, cold, demanding. I could picture her sitting at her desk in our living room, her perfect hair pulled back, her lips pressed tight as she stared at her phone. She hadn't called yet, hadn't stormed in like I half expected her to. Just that text, sitting there like a loaded gun. I switched back to Franklin, who was still rambling. "I mean, dude, how? You've been driving that rusty truck forever. You let Mom and Dad pay for dinner last month. What's the deal?" I rubbed my temple with my free hand, feeling a headache starting to creep in. "It's a long story," I said, which wasn't a lie but wasn't the whole truth either. "Look, I'll see you at the reunion, okay? We'll talk then." I hung up before he could push more, dropping the phone onto the desk like it was burning my hand. They were all scrambling now. I could feel it. Franklin freaking out, Clara stewing in silence, probably her parents next once the news trickled up to them. And me? I was just standing there in my paint-splattered jeans, the same guy they'd mocked for years, except now they'd have to rewrite everything they thought they knew. I hadn't told anyone, not Clara, not her family, not even my own parents before they passed. I'd kept the illusion alive on purpose. The truck? I'd bought it cheap 10 years ago, kept it running just to blend in. The clothes? Old habits from when I really was broke, plus they were comfortable. Letting them pay for dinner? That was just me biting my tongue, letting them feel big while I sat on a fortune they couldn't even imagine. Why didn't I say anything? Because I tried, back in the beginning. I'd sat Clara down once, showed her my sketches for a blockchain art platform, explained how NFTs could change everything. She'd smiled, patted my hand, and said, "That's nice, honey, but maybe focus on something practical." Gerald was worse. Every time I mentioned digital art, he'd snort and launch into a speech about how real men worked with their hands or wore suits, not played with computers. So I stopped talking. I built it anyway, piece by piece, in silence. I walked over to the window, pushing it open to let some air into the stuffy room. The street outside was quiet, just a couple kids riding bikes, the faint hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. It looked so normal, so small compared to what was happening in my head. My phone buzzed again, another text, this time from the family group chat. Franklin had dropped the Forbes link with a string of shocked face emojis. Margaret replied fast. Surely there's some mistake? No question mark. Just that prim, proper tone she always had, like she couldn't fathom me being anything but a failure. I didn't respond. Let them stew. Clara still hadn't called, which was weird. She's not the type to sit quiet when she's mad. She's all fire and noise, storming around until she gets answers. Maybe she was too shocked to move. Or maybe she was embarrassed, realizing she'd spent 12 years married to a billionaire and never noticed. I turned away from the window, my eyes landing on a framed photo on the shelf, me and Clara at our wedding, smiling like the world was ours. Back then, I thought I'd win them over eventually, prove myself with hard work and big ideas. But that first year, Gerald pulled me aside at Thanksgiving, his voice low and serious. Art's a hobby, son, he'd said, sipping his whiskey. You'll never provide for her like this. Come work for me. I'll set you straight. I'd clench my jaw, thanked him politely, and walked away. That night, I promised myself he'd eat those words one day. Not just him, Margaret with her pitying looks, Clara with her little sighs every time I talked about my projects. I'd make them see. And I did, didn't I? $5 billion later, here I was. But it didn't feel like a win yet. It felt like a storm about to break. I sank into my chair again, staring at Clara's text. What the hell? I could have texted back, explained everything, the late nights coding, the deals I'd signed under aliases, the money piling up in accounts she never knew about. But why should I? She'd never asked. None of them had. They'd assumed I was failing because that's what they wanted to see, a guy who couldn't keep up with their perfect little world. I'd let them think it, played along, because it was easier than fighting their smirks and lectures. But now the truth was out, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. I grabbed my coffee mug, took a sip even though it was cold, and let my mind settle. The reunion was in 2 days. 2 days until I'd walk in there, look them in the eye, and watch their whole story about me fall apart. I'd kept this secret for 12 years, built an empire while they laughed. Now they'd have to deal with it. And me? I was just getting started. I sat there in my studio, the phone quiet now after Franklin's call and Clara's text, but my head was anything but silent. The Forbes article still glowed on the screen, my name in big, bold letters, tying me to a world I'd kept hidden for so long. It was strange, seeing it out there, proof of everything I'd done, everything I'd built. But as I leaned back in my chair, the creak of the wood loud in the stillness, my mind slipped back to where it all started. 12 years ago, I was a different guy, newly married, fresh out of grad school, full of ideas and dumb enough to think Clara's family would listen. I'd been wrong about that, and the memory of it still stung, sharp and clear like it happened yesterday. It was a sunny afternoon, one of those early days after the wedding when everything still felt shiny and new. Clara and I had just moved into a tiny apartment, barely enough room for a bed and a table, but it was ours. I brought my laptop over to her parents' house that day, excited, buzzing with this big vision I couldn't wait to share. Gerald and Margaret were in their living room, all polished wood and fancy furniture, sipping tea like they were in some old movie. Clara sat next to me on the couch, her hand resting on my knee, smiling like she was proud. I pulled up my sketches, rough designs for a digital art platform, something that could use blockchain to sell unique pieces online. I'd been reading about this new thing called NFTs, barely a whisper back then, and I could see it changing everything. This could be huge, I told them, my voice shaky but sure. Artists could own their work, sell it direct, no galleries taking cuts. I just need some startup cash to get it going. I looked at Gerald, hoping he'd see it too. He was a businessman, after all, always talking about investments and smart moves. He didn't even let me finish. He set his teacup down, leaned back in his chair, and laughed. Not a quiet chuckle, a full, loud laugh, like I just told the best joke he'd ever heard. Pictures on computers, he said, wiping his eye like it was too much. You're a grown man, son. Get a real job. Margaret didn't laugh, but she gave me that tight little smile she always had, the one that said she felt sorry for me. Clara's hand stiffened on my knee, and when I glanced at her, she wasn't smiling anymore. It's interesting, she said softly, but I could hear the doubt creeping in. I closed the laptop, my face burning, and muttered something about thinking it over. Gerald clapped me on the shoulder as we left, like he was doing me a favor. Come work at the company, he said. We'll find you a desk. Something steady. I nodded, said thanks, but inside I was boiling. That was the moment I knew. They'd never take me seriously. So I went my own way. We moved into a one-bedroom loft a few weeks later, a cheap place with peeling paint and a leaky sink. Clara started her job at a marketing firm, and I stayed home, living off ramen noodles and whatever odd gigs I could pick up, fixing computers, painting signs, anything to keep the lights on. But every night, after she went to bed, I'd sit at that wobbly kitchen table with my laptop, working. I taught myself to code, learned how blockchain worked, built my first NFT drop from scratch. It was rough, clunky designs, no fancy branding, but I put it out there anyway, anonymous, just to see. 2 hours later, it sold out. Every single piece, gone. I stared at the screen, watching the numbers tick up in my account. $5,000, then 10, then 20. It wasn't much compared to now, but back then, it was everything. I reinvested it all, better software, more art, a bigger drop. By the end of that year, I'd made 50 grand. Clara thought I'd gotten a freelance gig. I let her think that. Things kept rolling after that. I built a platform, anonymous still, no name attached, where artists could upload their work, mint it as NFTs, and sell direct. It took off fast. People loved the idea, no middleman, no galleries skimming profits. I stayed up nights moderating it, fixing bugs, adding features. Clara would wake up sometimes, find me hunched over the laptop, and sigh. "You're obsessed," she'd say, half asleep. "It's just a hobby." I'd nod, say I'd come to bed soon, and keep going. By year 3, I'd launched a second platform, cleaner, faster, with a licensing system for big buyers, galleries, brands, even movie studios. That's when the money really started coming in. 80 million by year 5, all tucked away in accounts I never told anyone about. I bought the truck then, an old beater from a guy down the street, just to keep up the act. Clara's family saw it and nodded like it made sense. Poor me, still scraping by. I could have told them then. Could have sat Clara down, shown her the bank statements, the deals I'd signed with companies across the world. But I didn't. Why? Because every time I brought up my work, even casually, they shut it down. Thanksgiving a few years in, I'd mentioned NFTs again, how they were catching on, how I'd sold some pieces. Gerald smirked over his turkey. "Still playing with your little toys," he said. Margaret changed the subject to Clara's promotion. I stopped trying after that. I built in the shadows instead, acquired competitors, signed artists, turned my platforms into an empire. By year 10, I'd hit $1 billion. I bought the island that year, a quiet little spot off the coast, just because I could. Clara thought I was at a work retreat when I went to sign the papers. Now, sitting in my studio, the memory of those early days felt like a lifetime ago. 12 years of silence, of letting them think I was nothing, all leading to this, a Forbes list with my name on it. I stood up, walked to the shelf where I kept my old sketchbook, the one with those first designs. I flipped it open, ran my fingers over the faded pencil lines. Gerald's laugh echoed in my head, and I clenched my jaw. He'd been wrong. They'd all been wrong. And in 2 days, at that reunion, they'd see it. I'd make sure of it. I set the sketchbook down, my hands steady now. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving I'd been more than they ever thought, quietly, patiently, all along. I was still in my studio, the old sketchbook back on the shelf, when the chaos really started. My phone had been quiet for maybe an hour after Franklin's call and Clara's text, but that didn't last. It buzzed again, loud and insistent, and when I picked it up, I saw the family group chat blowing up. Franklin had dropped the Forbes link, same one Clara sent me, followed by a string of shocked emojis, wide eyes, exploding heads, a cartoon guy fainting. Margaret was next, her message popping up like clockwork. Surely there's some mistake? No question mark, just that prim tone she always used, like she couldn't imagine me tied to anything as big as $1 billion empire. Gerald didn't chime in, but I could picture him sitting in his study, squinting at his phone through those thick glasses, his mouth set in a hard line. Then Marla, Clara's older sister, texted, "This has to be a typo, right?" She added a laughing emoji, but I knew her well enough to tell it was forced. Marla ran PR for the family company, always polished, always in control, and I could almost hear her brain spinning, trying to figure out how this slipped past her radar. I didn't reply. Let them squirm. I set the phone face down on the desk and rubbed my hands over my face, trying to shake off the mix of nerves and satisfaction bubbling up inside me. The article had hit like a grenade, and they were all scrambling to pick up the pieces. Clara still hadn't called, which was starting to feel heavier, her silence louder than any yelling would have been. 5 missed calls popped up on my screen then, all from her, one after the other like she'd finally snapped out of her shock. I didn't pick up. Not yet. I needed a minute to breathe, to think. This was moving fast, faster than I'd expected, and I had to figure out how to play it. That's when my other phone buzzed, the private one I kept for work, the one no one in the family knew about. It was Jules, my assistant, texting in her usual clipped way. Forbes is live. Plan reveal activated. Jets fueled. Islands prepped. Cars are en route. You good? I smiled a little, despite everything. Jules was a rock, brilliant, no nonsense, always ready to move when I said go. I typed back, good. Keep it rolling. Her reply was instant. Done. Plan reveal. We cooked it up months ago, half joking at first, when she'd warned me the press was getting close. They'll find you eventually, she'd said, sitting across from me in her tiny office, her voice flat like she was reading a grocery list. What's the move when they do? I leaned back, thought about it, and said, we show them everything. All at once. Make it impossible to ignore. She'd nodded, started making calls, and that was that. Now it was real. The private island I'd bought last year, a 200-acre chunk of paradise I'd kept off everyone's radar, was being prepped right this second. Staff were setting up the resort, the galleries, the bungalows. 3 Rolls-Royces were on their way to Gerald and Margaret's estate, ready to pick up the family for the reunion. The jet, my jet, one of 3, was fueled up, waiting to fly us all to the island. And the art installations, my pride and joy, were going live, holoscreens, LED displays, the works. It was all coming together, just like I'd planned. I stood up, pacing the studio again, my boots thudding against the floor. The adrenaline was kicking in now, sharp and electric. This wasn't just about the reunion anymore. It was personal, sure, but it was bigger than that. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email alert. I opened it, and my stomach did a little flip. It was from an international investor, some big shot I'd met at a conference years back. Subject line, merger proposal. I skimmed it. His firm wanted to partner up, fold my platforms into their portfolio, a deal worth another $2 billion on top of what I already had. We've been watching your growth, the email said. Time to take it global. $2 billion. I leaned against the wall, letting that sink in. It was tempting, more money, more reach, but it'd have to wait. This weekend wasn't about business. It was about me, Clara, her family, and 12 years of silence I was finally breaking. I forwarded it to Jules with a note. Hold off. After the reunion, she'd handle it, like always. The group chat was still going nuts. Franklin posted again. Yo, is this why you never chipped in for gas? More emojis. Marla replied. Seriously, someone explain this. I could feel their confusion, their panic, through the screen. They'd spent years building this story about me, the broke guy, the dreamer who'd never amount to much. Clara's cousin Ruben jumped in next. Wait, didn't I meet you at a pitch event like 10 years ago? You had some weird art thing? Yeah, he had. I'd pitched him my first platform, back when I was still scrambling for cash. He'd smirked, said it'd never work, and walked away. Now he was worth a fraction of me, and I bet that stung. I didn't answer him either. Let them figure it out on their own. I walked over to the window, looking out at the street again. The kids on bikes were gone, the lawnmower quiet now. It was just me and the hum of the studio, the weight of what was coming pressing down. 2 days until the reunion, but it felt like it was already starting. The article, the calls, the texts. My whole world was shifting, and I was the one turning the wheel. I thought about Clara again, those 5 missed calls. She'd be mad, sure, but what else? Hurt? Embarrassed? I didn't know. She'd always cared about what people thought, her parents, her friends, the neighbors. Me being a billionaire didn't fit her neat little picture. Maybe that's why she hadn't called again. Maybe she was too busy rewriting her own story. I turned back to my desk, picked up the gold-lettered invitation. It felt flimsy now, small compared to what I was about to bring. The Rolls-Royces would roll up soon, the jet would take off, and I'd walk into that reunion not as the guy they pitted, but as the guy they couldn't ignore. Jules had everything in motion, cars, jet, island, all of it. I just had to hold it together until then. My phone buzzed one more time, Clara, finally texting again. We need to talk. Now. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Not yet, I decided. Let her wait. Let them all wait. The article was just the start. The real drop was coming, and I'd be ready when it hit. I was still holding the phone, staring at Clara's, we need to talk. Now, text, when I heard the front door slam open. My studio's on the second floor of our house, tucked away in what used to be a guest room, so the sound hit me like a jolt. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, and I knew it was her before she even burst in. Clara stormed through the doorway, her face flushed red, her eyes wide and wild like she'd just run a mile. She was still in her work clothes, crisp blouse, pencil skirt, heels clicking hard against the wood floor. Her purse dangled from one arm, swinging like she'd forgotten it was there. "Why didn't you tell me?" she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet of the room. She didn't wait for an answer, just kept going, pacing in front of my desk. "Forbes? Billionaire? $5 billion? And you didn't say a word? What is this? Some kind of sick joke?" I leaned back against the wall, crossing my arms, watching her unravel. She looked furious, but there was something else there too, panic, maybe, or fear. I kept my voice calm, steady, even though my pulse was thumping in my chest. "You never asked," I said. It was the truth, plain and simple. She stopped pacing, spun to face me, her mouth open like she couldn't believe what I just said. "Never asked?" she repeated, her tone rising. "What was I supposed to ask, huh? Hey, honey, are you secretly a billionaire? You let me think. You let all of us think. You were struggling. That stupid truck, those rowdy clothes, that time I had to borrow rent money because you said you were short. Was that all a lie?" Her hands were shaking now, and she dropped her purse on the floor, not even noticing. I took a slow breath, keeping my eyes on hers. "No," I said. "Not a lie. You just assumed. You all did." She blinked, like my words had slapped her, and for a second, she didn't know what to say. I pushed off the wall, stepping closer to my desk, feeling the weight of 12 years settle between us. "That rent thing? I wanted to see what you'd do. You offered. I took it. But struggling? That stopped a long time ago. You never noticed because you didn't want to." Her face twisted, anger flaring up again. "Don't you dare put this on me," she snapped. "You hid this. You lied to my face every day. What was I supposed to think? You're up here painting, messing with your little computer projects, while I'm out there working, keeping us afloat, or so I thought. And now I find out you're some mogul? Through a magazine?" I didn't flinch. I'd known this was coming, maybe not this exact moment, but something like it. I'd pictured it 100 times, her yelling, me standing there, the truth spilling out like paint from a tipped-over can. "You wanted to believe I was failing," I said, my voice still even. "It made you feel better. Superior. Just like your dad did." That hit her hard. Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step toward me, her finger jabbing the air. "Don't bring my father into this," she hissed. "This is about you and me. 12 years, and you kept this from me. Why? Were you laughing at me the whole time? Was this some game to you?" I shook my head, feeling a flicker of something, regret. Maybe, but not enough to back down. "No game," I said. "I tried telling you, Clara. Back when we started. I showed you the plans, the ideas. You smiled and told me to get something practical. Your dad laughed in my face. After that, I stopped talking. I just did it instead." She stared at me, her chest heaving, like she was trying to find a crack in what I'd said. "That was years ago," she shot back. "You could have tried again. You could have trusted me." "Trusted you?" I said, raising my voice for the first time. "Every time I brought it up, you sighed or changed the subject. Gerald called it a hobby. Margaret looked at me like I was a stray dog you brought home. You all decided who I was, and I let you. But don't act like I didn't try." She flinched, just a little, and I saw it, the first crack in her armor. Her shoulders dropped, and she ran a hand through her hair, messing up the perfect strands. "I didn't know," she said, quieter now. "I didn't know it was this." I nodded, stepping back to lean against the desk. "Yeah, you didn't. Because you didn't want to see it?" The room went quiet then, the only sound her breathing and the faint hum of the monitors behind me. She looked at me, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time in years. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. "So what now?" she asked, her voice small. "You're a billionaire. You've got jets and islands and whatever else. Where does that leave us?" I didn't have an answer, not yet. I just shrugged, feeling the calm settle over me again. "I don't know," I said. "That's up to you, I guess. But the reunion's in 2 days. You'll see the rest then." She frowned, confused. "The rest?" I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Jules had everything moving: cars, jet, island, and Clara would find out soon enough. She stood there, staring at me like I was a stranger, and maybe I was. 12 years of marriage, and she'd missed it all. Not because I'd hidden it so well, but because she'd never looked. "I need to think," she said finally, grabbing her purse off the floor. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door, glancing back. You should have told me, she whispered, more to herself than to me. Then she was gone, her heels clicking down the stairs, the door slamming shut behind her. I stood there, alone again, the silence thick around me. My phone buzzed, another text from the group chat. Franklin this time? Clara's pissed? Huh? I ignored it, setting the phone down. She was pissed, sure, but there was more to it. I'd seen it in her eyes, fear, not just anger. Fear that she'd been wrong about me, that she'd built her whole life around a version of me that wasn't real. I didn't feel bad for her, not exactly. She'd chosen that version, clung to it, because it fit what she wanted. Now she had to face the truth, and so did I. I walked to the window, watching her car peel out of the driveway, tires squealing against the pavement. 2 days until the reunion. 2 days until they all saw what I'd been hiding. Clara's pride was cracked now, but it wasn't broken yet. That had come soon enough. And me? I felt nothing but calm, like a storm had passed and left me standing. This was just the beginning. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, the kind of peaceful noise that didn't match the mess in my head. Clara hadn't come home last night after storming out of my studio. I'd stayed up late, messing with a canvas just to keep my hands busy, waiting to hear her car pull in. It never did. She'd texted once, around midnight, staying at Mom's, and that was it. No fight, no follow-up, just those 3 words. I didn't reply. What was there to say? She needed space, and I needed to focus. Today was the day it all started, the reunion, the big reveal, the moment I'd been building toward for years. I rolled out of bed, my back stiff from sleeping on the couch, and checked my phone. Jules had texted, "Cars arrive at the estate in 2 hours. Jet's ready. Lars says hi." I smiled a little. Lars, the pilot, was a good guy, ex-Air Force, big laugh, loved my art. He'd lighten things up when the time came. I showered quick, threw on a plain t-shirt and jeans, nothing fancy, not yet, and headed downstairs. The house felt empty without Clara, quieter than usual. I made coffee, black and strong, and stood at the kitchen counter, staring out at the backyard. The old truck sat there in the driveway, rusted and beat up, a relic of the life I'd let them think I had. In a few hours, that life would be gone for good. I sipped the coffee, letting the heat wake me up, and thought about yesterday, Clara's anger, her shaking hands, the way she looked at me like I'd betrayed her. Maybe I had, in a way. But she'd betrayed me too, hadn't she? 12 years of dismissing me, sighing at my hobbies, never once asking what I was really doing. I'd built an empire while she rolled her eyes, and now she was mad I hadn't handed her the blueprints. My phone buzzed again. Jules, Rolls-Royces are at the estate. Family's freaking out. You sure about this? I typed back. Yeah. See you at the Jet. She didn't reply, but I knew she was on it. 3 Rolls-Royces pulling up to Gerald and Margaret's fancy countryside place, black, sleek, shining in the sun, would have stopped them cold. I could picture it, Margaret clutching her pearls, Gerald squinting out the window, Franklin snapping pictures like a kid at a car show. Clara was probably there too, still fuming, trying to figure out how to spin this to her parents. I finished my coffee, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The truck grumbled to life, same as always, and I drove the hour to the estate, the familiar roads winding through trees and fields. My stomach was tight, but not from nerves, excitement, maybe, or just the weight of what was coming. When I pulled up, the Rolls-Royces were parked in a neat row out front, their engines purring soft. The family was already outside, dressed for what they thought was a casual weekend, Gerald in a polo, Margaret in a sundress, Franklin in shorts and a loud shirt. Clara stood off to the side, arms crossed, her face tight. They all turned as I climbed out of the truck, the gravel crunching under my boots. "What's this?" Gerald called, waving a hand at the cars. "Some kind of prank?" Before I could answer, the Jet roared overhead, low enough to rattle the windows, its silver body catching the light. It circled once, then landed smooth on the private airstrip behind the estate, one I'd paid to have built years ago, back when Gerald thought I was borrowing money for rent. The side of the Jet gleamed with gold lettering, Cavill Visuals, redefining digital art. My company. My name. Their jaws dropped, every single one of them. Franklin let out a loud, "Whoa," and pulled out his phone, filming. Margaret's hand went to her chest, her pearls trembling. Gerald blinked hard, like he couldn't trust his eyes. "Is that your Jet?" he asked, his voice shaky for the first time I could remember. I smiled, easy and calm. "Yeah," I said. "One of 3. Shall we? I didn't wait for them to answer, just started walking toward the airstrip. The drivers, sharp guys in black suits Jules had hired, opened the Rolls-Royce doors, and the family piled in, slow and stunned, like they were stepping into a dream. Clara hung back, her eyes locked on me. "You're serious," she said, not a question. "Dead serious," I replied, then climbed into the lead car. She followed, sliding in beside me, her perfume sharp in the leather-scented air. The ride to the jet was quiet, the family split between the cars, no one knowing what to say. Clara stared out the window, her hands clenched in her lap. I didn't push her. Let her process it. When we reached the airstrip, Lars was waiting by the steps, grinning wide. "Hey, boss," he called, tipping his cap. "Nice day for a flight, huh?" I laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Perfect day," I said. The family trailed behind me, still dazed, as we boarded. Inside, the jet was a world of its own, cream leather seats, polished wood, hollow screens flickering to life along the walls. My NFT collections rotated on display, glowing colors and sharp lines, pieces that had sold for millions. Champagne sat chilled in buckets, courtesy of Jules. "Welcome aboard," I said, turning to face them. "Make yourselves comfortable." Franklin flopped into a seat, grinning like a kid. "This is insane, man," he said, grabbing a glass. Margaret sank down slow, her eyes darting around, while Gerald stood stiff, staring at the screens. These are yours?" he asked, pointing at the art. "Designed them, sold them, built the platforms they run on," I said. "That's what I've been doing." He didn't reply, just sat down heavy, like the wind had been knocked out of him. Marla, who'd been quiet, looked pale, her PR brain probably screaming at the missed opportunity. Reuben, Clara's cousin, fidgeted with his tie, avoiding my eyes. He knew he'd blown it years ago. Clara stayed standing, her arms still crossed. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice tight. "My island," I said, simple, like it was nothing. "You'll see." Lars's voice crackled over the speaker. "Buckle up, folks. We're off." The jet engines hummed, and we taxied down the runway, lifting smooth into the sky. I leaned back in my seat, watching them, Gerald gripping the armrests, Margaret sipping champagne like it'd calm her nerves, Franklin snapping selfies. Clara sat across from me, her eyes locked on mine, searching for something. "You're enjoying this," she said, low enough that only I could hear. "Maybe," I admitted. "Been a long time coming." She didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked away. The jet climbed higher, the estate shrinking below us, and I felt it, the weight lifting, the mask gone. They hadn't seen the island yet, hadn't seen the half of it. But they would. And when they did, there'd be no going back. I sat back in the plush leather seat of the jet, the hum of the engine steady beneath us as we cut through the clouds. The family was scattered around the cabin, Franklin sprawled out with a second glass of champagne, Gerald staring out the window like he could make sense of this from 30,000 feet, Margaret clutching her glass so tight I thought it might crack. Clara sat across from me, her face still tight, her eyes flicking between me and the hollow screens showing off my NFT collections. The art shifted every few seconds, bold abstracts, sleek digital sculptures, pieces that had sold for millions to collectors across the world. She hadn't said much since we took off, just that one line about me enjoying this. Maybe I was. After 12 years of swallowing their pity and smirks, it felt good to watch them squirm, to see the confusion on their faces as they tried to catch up. Lars's voice crackled over the speaker again, breaking the quiet. "Folks, we're starting our descent. Island's dead ahead. Hope you're ready for a hell of a view." Franklin perked up, pressing his face to the window like a kid, while Gerald shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. I leaned forward, catching Clara's eye. "You'll want to see this," I said, nodding toward the window. She hesitated, then turned, her breath catching as the jet dipped lower. There it was, my island, 200 acres of green and blue stretching out against the ocean, a sleek resort gleaming in the sun, private bungalows dotting the shore, and branded galleries rising up like modern art themselves. The water sparkled, clear as glass, and the airstrip cut a clean line across the edge. It was mine, every inch of it, bought and built with the money they never knew I had. The jet touched down smooth, Lars landing it like it was nothing, and the family sat there, stunned, as the engines wound down. I stood up, stretching my legs. "Welcome to my island," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Let's go." They followed me out, slow and quiet, stepping onto the tarmac where warm air hit us, thick with salt and flowers. A massive LED sign flashed to life as we walked toward the resort. "Welcome to the Cavill Empire. Built while you doubted me." I'd told Jules to program it months ago, half as a joke, but seeing it now, big, bold, impossible to miss, it felt right. Franklin let out a low whistle. "Dude," he said, shaking his head. "This is next level." Margaret's hand went to her pearls again, her eyes wide. Gerald stopped dead, staring at the sign, his face unreadable. Clara stayed close, her arms crossed, but I could see her taking it all in: the manicured paths, the glass-walled buildings, the staff in crisp uniforms waiting to greet us. We moved into the resort, a sprawling place with open ceilings and ocean views, and I led them to the bungalow's private suites I'd had set up for each of them. "Pick one," I said, waving a hand. "They're all yours for the weekend." Inside each room, I'd left something special, a personalized portfolio, thick binders sitting on the desks. I watched as they found them, flipping through the pages I'd spent weeks putting together with Jules. Franklin opened his first, laughing. "What's this? A brag book," he said, but his grin faded as he read. It wasn't just bragging, it was proof. Letters I'd sent years ago, asking for small investments, all rejected. Gerald's was there, a note from 2012, me offering him a $100,000 stake in my first platform. He turned it down, said it was foolish. That stake was worth $160 million now. Marla's binder had emails from her PR firm, declining to represent me back when I was starting out. Now her company begged for licensing deals, and I'd said no every time. Ruben showed the pitch he'd passed on my platform, back when it was just an idea. He'd lost out on billions. Gerald sat down hard on the edge of his bed, the binder open in his lap. This is real?" he asked, his voice rough. "Every word," I said, leaning against the doorway. "I kept the receipts." Margaret looked over his shoulder, her face pale. "You did all this," she whispered, more to herself than me. I nodded. "While you thought I was failing." Franklin flipped through his, quieter now. "Man, I didn't even know what NFTs were back then," he said. "You tried telling me once, didn't you?" I shrugged. "Yeah." You laughed. He didn't have a comeback for that. Marla clutched her binder like it was burning her hands, her perfect PR smile gone. Ruben just stared at his smug VC attitude nowhere to be found. Clara's bungalow was last. She opened her portfolio slow, her fingers trembling as she turned the pages. It wasn't like the others. No business stuff, just personal. Notes I'd written her early on, sketches I'd shown her, ideas I'd shared before I gave up trying. A photo of us from year 2, me at the kitchen table with my laptop, her kissing my cheek. Under it, I'd written, "You stopped asking what I was working on." She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "I didn't know you were capable of this," she said, her voice barely there. I stepped closer, keeping my tone even. "You never wanted to see it," I said. "You like me better small." She flinched, like I'd hit her, and turned away, staring out at the ocean through the window. The air felt heavy now, the weight of those binders sinking in. They'd all had a chance to believe in me. Gerald with his money, Marla with her connections, Ruben with his venture capital, Clara with her trust. They'd said no, every time, and I'd built it anyway. I left them to sit with it, and walked outside, the sun warm on my face. The island was alive, staff bustling, screens glowing with my art, the ocean lapping at the shore. This was mine, not just the land but the victory. I'd bought it last year, a quiet move after a big deal, and named it Cavill Point. No one knew, not even Clara. Now they did. I stood by the water, hands in my pockets, feeling the breeze. Jules came up beside me, her tablet tucked under her arm. "They're shell-shocked," she said, deadpan as ever. "Good," I replied. "They should be." She nodded, then pointed at the resort. "Dinner's in an hour. Sasha's got the kitchen running. You ready for round 2? Sasha was the chef, some Netflix star I'd hired for the weekend. I smiled. "Yeah, let's keep it coming." The family was quiet now, reflective, but I wasn't done. They'd doubted me for 12 years. This island, these binders, the jet, it was just the start. They'd see the rest soon enough, and I'd make sure they never forgot it. I stood on the shore of my island, the waves lapping at the sand, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. The air was warm, thick with salt and the faint smell of flowers, and the resort behind me buzzed with quiet energy, staff moving quick, setting up for the night. Jules had just left to check on things, her tablet glowing as she walked off, and I was alone for a minute, letting it all sink in. The family was still in their bungalows, probably flipping through those binders, trying to wrap their heads around what I'd shown them. Gerald's face when he saw that $160 million mistake. Pale, tight, like he'd swallowed something sour. Marla's hands shaking as she read her firm's rejection letters. Clara's whisper, "I didn't know you were capable of this," still echoing in my ears. It felt good, I won't lie, seeing them stunned, seeing the story they'd built about me crumble. But it wasn't enough yet. Tonight, I'd drive it home. I headed back to the resort, the glass-walled dining hall glowing soft against the dusk. Sasha, the chef, had outdone herself. 7 courses, each one plated like art, the kind of food you'd see on her Netflix show. The table was long, set with candles and crystal, the ocean stretching out dark beyond the windows. The family trickled in slow, still quiet, like they weren't sure how to act. Franklin showed up first, his loud shirt swapped for a button-down, grinning but subdued. "Smells amazing in here," he said, sliding into a seat. Margaret and Gerald came next, her in a silk dress, him in a stiff blazer, old money habits dying hard. Marla followed, her face composed again, but her eyes darted around like she was calculating something. Reuben slunk in, avoiding me, his tie loose like he'd given up. Clara was last, her hair down now, a simple black dress hugging her frame. She sat across from me, her expression unreadable. "Evening," I said, standing at the head of the table. "Hope you're hungry." "Sasha's the best," hired her straight off her show. Margaret managed a small smile. "How lovely," she said, her voice thin. Gerald just nodded, his hands folded tight. The staff brought out the first course, some kind of fancy soup, bright orange with a swirl of cream. And we ate in near silence, the clink of spoons loud against the quiet. I let it stretch, let them stew, until the third course hit the table, grilled fish, delicate and perfect. Then I stood again, signaling to Jules in the corner. She tapped her tablet, and screens descended from the ceiling, big, sleek, glowing with my timeline. "Here's the story," I said, my voice steady, filling the room. 12 years of it. The first slide popped up, 2011. A photo of me at Gerald's house, laptop open, pitching my idea. Under it, his quote, "Get a real job." I looked at him, his face red now. "You said that," I reminded him. I didn't listen. Next slide, 2014. My first NFT drop, sold out in 2 hours. Another quote, this time from Franklin. "This NFT thing won't last." He squirmed, laughing nervously. "Guess I was wrong," he muttered. I nodded. "Yeah, it lasted." The timeline rolled on. 2017, $100 million valuation, me still driving that beat-up truck. 2021, passed $1 billion, bought my first jet. 2023, acquired 2 competitors while Clara's family planned a real job, intervention I'd dodged. 2024, Forbes list, $5.1 billion. The final slide was a photo of me on this island, the day I'd bought it, standing where I'd been an hour ago. I let the screens hang there, the dates and numbers staring down at them. "For 12 years, I said. "I played the fool you expected me to be. The broke guy, the dreamer, the one you pitted at every dinner. But I wasn't failing, I was building." I paused, looking around the table. "This empire didn't happen by accident. It happened while you laughed, while you sighed, while you told me I'd never make it. I kept quiet, let you think what you wanted. Now you know." Gerald choked on his wine, coughing hard, his hand trembling as he set the glass down. Margaret stared into her plate, her fork still. Franklin leaned back, shaking his head slow. "Man," he said, "you've been holding out." Marla's voice cut through, sharp and thin. "You could have told us," she said, her PR mask slipping. "We could have helped." I turned to her, calm. "I asked you to represent me in 2015. Your firm said no, said I wasn't worth the time. Now you want in." She flushed, looking away. Reuben shifted, his chair creaking. "I didn't know it'd blow up like that," he mumbled, about his rejected pitch. "No one did," I said. "Except me." Then Clara spoke, her voice low but clear. "Why didn't you fight harder? For us to see?" I met her eyes, steady. "I did, at first. You all shut it down. So I fought my way, built this instead. You just didn't notice." The room went quiet again, the weight of it pressing down. Gerald cleared his throat, his voice rough. "You've made your point," he said, but it wasn't smug anymore. It was small, almost broken. I nodded. "Good." The screens retracted, and Sasha's team brought out the next course, steak, rich and sizzling. We ate, But the air was different now. They weren't just stunned, they were humiliated, each in their own way. Gerald's pride, Marla's control, Reuben's arrogance, all cracked open. Franklin tried to lighten it, cracking a joke about the jet, but it fell flat. Reuben excused himself halfway through, muttering about the bathroom, and didn't come back. Margaret kept her eyes down, sipping wine like it'd save her. Clara didn't eat much, just pushed her food around. When the dessert came, some chocolate thing, fancy and layered, she looked up at me. "You're not the man I married," she said, soft but firm. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "No," I said. "I'm the man I've always been. You just didn't see him." She held my gaze, then looked away, her jaw tight. The meal ended quiet, the family filing out one by one, back to their bungalows. I stayed, watching the staff clear the table, the ocean black beyond the glass. Jules came over, her tablet off for once. "That was brutal," she said. "No judgment, just fact." "Needed to be," I replied. She nodded. "They're not done processing." "They'll have to," I said. "There's more tomorrow." I walked outside, the night cool now, stars sharp overhead. The timeline had hit them hard, laid out every chance they'd missed, every time they dismissed me. It wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about proving I'd been more than their pity case. They saw it now, whether they liked it or not. I felt lighter, like a weight I'd carried for years was finally off my chest. But it wasn't over. The reunion had one more day, and I had one more card to play. They'd never forget this, never forget me. And that was the point. I woke up early the next morning, the sun just creeping over the horizon, painting the ocean gold outside my bungalow. The island was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt heavy after last night's dinner. I'd slept better than I expected, the weight of that timeline off my shoulders, but my mind was already turning toward today. The family had seen the jet, the island, the binders, the screens. They knew the scale of what I'd built. But they didn't know me. Not really, not yet. Last night had been about facts, numbers, dates, proof. Today was about something else. I rolled out of bed, threw on a shirt and shorts, and stepped outside, the air warm and salty against my skin. The resort was waking up, staff moving quiet, Sasha's kitchen already humming with breakfast prep. I had a plan, but first, I needed to see where they stood. I was halfway to the dining hall when I spotted a note slipped under my door, folded neat and plain. I picked it up, my stomach tightening as I recognized Gerald's handwriting, blocky, old school, like he'd pressed the pen too hard. I opened it slow, standing there on the porch. "I was wrong," it said. "You didn't just succeed. You redefined what success looks like. I'm sorry I didn't see it." That was it. No flourish, no excuses, just those 3 lines. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. Gerald, the man who'd laughed in my face, who'd told me I'd never provide for his daughter, was apologizing. It didn't feel like a win, not exactly, more like a crack in a wall I'd spent years banging my head against. I folded the note, tucked it in my pocket, and kept walking. He'd said it, sure, but I'd see if he meant it. Breakfast was in the open-air pavilion, a spread of fruit, pastries, and coffee laid out on long tables. The family was already there, scattered around, quieter than yesterday. Franklin waved me over, a croissant in hand. "Morning, billionaire," he said, grinning, but it was softer, less cocky. Margaret nodded at me, her smile tight but real. Marla sat alone, sipping coffee, her face composed again, PR mode back on. Reuben wasn't there, probably still licking his wounds. Gerald sat with Margaret, his posture stiff, but he met my eyes when I walked in, gave me a small nod. Clara was at the far end, her plate untouched, staring out at the water. I grabbed a coffee and sat across from her, the silence between us thick. "Sleep okay?" I asked, keeping it light. She shrugged. "Not really. You?" "Well enough," I said. She didn't push it, just nodded and looked away. The meal passed slow, the family talking in low tones, weather, the island, safe stuff. No one mentioned the binders or the timeline, like they were afraid to touch it. Then Clara stood, brushing her hands on her shorts. "Walk with me," she asked, her voice quiet but firm. I nodded, setting my cup down, and followed her out. We headed down a path toward the beach, the sand soft under my feet, the waves crashing steady in the distance. She didn't say anything at first, just walked, her arms crossed tight. I let her lead, waiting. Finally, she stopped by the water, turning to face me. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Not just for doubting you. For treating you like less. I didn't see you. I didn't want to. I thought I married down, and I held on to that because it made me feel I don't know. Safe, maybe. I stood there, the wind tugging at my shirt, letting her words hang. It was the first time she'd said it out loud, the thing I'd felt for years. You thought I was a project, I said, keeping my tone even. Someone you could fix, or at least manage. She winced, but didn't deny it. Yeah, she said. And when you didn't need fixing, I didn't know what to do. So I ignored it, pushed it down. But this, she waved a hand at the island, the resort, the jet in the distance, this is you. The real you. And I missed it. Her voice cracked, and she looked down, digging her toes into the sand. I don't know how we come back from that. I took a step closer, the water lapping at my feet. You didn't marry down, I said. You married someone with vision. You just didn't recognize it because it didn't look like your dad's money or your sister's polish. I didn't need your help, Clara. I needed you to believe in me. You didn't. She nodded slow, her eyes wet now, tears spilling quiet down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. And I hate that I didn't. But I see it now. I see you. I didn't say anything right away, just watched her, the woman I'd loved for 12 years, standing there broken open. Part of me wanted to reach out, pull her close, tell her we'd figure it out. But another part, the part that had built this island, this empire, held back. Seeing me now's a start, I said finally. But it's up to you what happens next. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not pretending anymore either. She wiped her face, nodding again. I don't want to lose you, she said, her voice small. But I know I've got work to do. To fix this. Us. I didn't argue, didn't promise anything. Yeah, I said. You do. We stood there a minute longer, the waves filling the silence, then walked back slow. She stayed close, not touching, but near enough I could feel her. When we got to the pavilion, the family was finishing up, Gerald standing to meet us. Got your note, I said, pulling it from my pocket. He looked at it, then at me, his face softer than I'd ever seen it. Meant it, he said. You proved me wrong, son. Took guts. I nodded. Took time, I said. But yeah, the rest of the day passed easy, swimming, lounging, the family loosening up a little. Clara stuck by me, quiet but there, like she was testing the ground between us. Gerald asked about the jet, real questions, no lectures. Margaret complimented the island, her voice genuine. Marla even cracked a smile, offering to revisit, a deal. I laughed it off. By dusk, it felt different, not fixed, but shifting. Clara and I sat on the beach again, watching the sun sink. I'll try, she said, her hand brushing mine. That's all I can say right now. I squeezed her fingers light. That's enough for now, I said. The apologies weren't everything, but they were something, a start. And I'd take it, one step at a time. Tomorrow, I'd show them the rest. Tonight, I'd let it breathe. I woke up on the last morning of the reunion with the sun already high, streaming through the bungalow's windows and casting long stripes across the floor. The island was alive outside, birds calling, waves rolling steady, the faint clatter of Sasha's team prepping breakfast. I lay there a minute, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the weekend settle in my chest. Yesterday had been heavy, Gerald's note, Clara's apology, the slow thaw of the family's shock. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was something. Today, though, was the final piece. I'd shown them the past, the proof, the empire I'd built. Now I'd show them the future, what I was still reaching for. I rolled out of bed, threw on a clean shirt and shorts, and stepped outside, the air warm and thick against my skin. Breakfast was in the pavilion again, the same spread of fruit and pastries, coffee steaming in big urns. The family was there, looking more relaxed than before. Franklin in a loud shirt again, joking with Lars about the jet, Margaret sipping tea with a small smile, Gerald reading a paper he'd found somewhere. Marla was on her phone, probably plotting her next PR move, and Ruben sat quiet, still a little off after the binders. Clara was at the table's end, her hair loose, picking at a mango slice. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes softer than yesterday, and gave me a nod. I grabbed a coffee and sat across from her, the buzz of the family around us feeling almost normal. Big day, she asked, her voice low. Yeah, I said, sipping the coffee. Last one. She didn't push, just nodded back, and we ate in quiet, the unspoken stuff still hanging between us. After breakfast, I stood, tapping my mug to get their attention. Got something to show you, I said, keeping it simple. Meet me at the main gallery in 10. They looked up, curious, Franklin grinning, Gerald raising an eyebrow, Clara tilting her head. I didn't explain, just walked off, letting them follow when they were ready. The main gallery was the heart of the island, a sleek, open space with glass walls and high ceilings, screens and projectors built into every corner. I designed it myself, a place to showcase what I'd done and what was coming. Jules was already there, her tablet glowing, setting up the last details. "Ready?" she asked, deadpan as ever. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do it." The family filed in slow, taking seats on the curved benches facing a massive screen. I stood in front, hands in my pockets, waiting until they settled. "This weekend's been about what I've built," I started, my voice steady. "The jet, the island, the money, stuff you didn't see for 12 years. But it's not just about the past. It's about what's next." I nodded to Jules, and the screen lit up, a logo, bold and sharp, Cavil Collective. Murmurs rippled through them, Franklin leaning forward, Clara's eyes narrowing. "This is my new project," I said. "A decentralized platform for artists, global, open, no gatekeepers. Anyone can join, mint their work, sell it direct. No galleries, no middlemen, just creators and buyers. Projected valuation, $10 billion in 5 years." Gerald let out a low whistle, rare for him. $10 billion? He repeated, like he couldn't believe it. "That's the plan," I said. "It's what I've been working toward, freedom for artists like me 12 years ago, who didn't have a shot otherwise." The screen shifted, showing mock-ups, clean interfaces, artist profiles, live auctions. "It's live next month," I added. "Already got 1,000 creators signed up, big names too. This isn't just a business, it's a movement." Franklin clapped, loud and sudden. "That's dope, man," he said, grinning. Margaret smiled, real this time. "Very impressive," she said, her voice soft. Marla nodded, her PR brain clearly spinning, but she didn't pitch anything, not yet. I turned to Clara, catching her eye. "This is who I am," I said, quieter now, just for her. "Not the truck, not the paint stains. This." She held my gaze, then nodded slow, like she was finally getting it. I looked back at the group. "You doubted me once. That's done. Now you see." They clapped, awkward at first, then stronger, even Gerald joining in, his hands stiff, but there. It wasn't wild cheering, but it was real, and that was enough. I stepped back, letting Jules take over, walking them through the tech side while I slipped outside. The gallery's deck overlooked the ocean, and I leaned on the railing, breathing deep. Jules found me later, the family still inside, buzzing about the platform. "Good reveal," she said, standing beside me. "They're hooked." "Hope so," I replied, watching the waves. She paused, then asked, "Was it worth it?" The silence, the pretending. I thought about it, 12 years of biting my tongue, letting them think I was less, building in the shadows. "Yeah," I said finally. "Success wasn't the goal. Freedom was. And now they see me for who I am." She nodded, no argument, just fact. "They do." The family came out eventually, heading back to pack up. The jet was leaving soon. Clara hung back, walking over to me. "That's incredible," she said, her voice soft. "What you're doing." "Thanks," I said, turning to face her. She stepped closer, her hand brushing mine. "I meant what I said yesterday. I'll try to see you, to fix us." I squeezed her fingers, light. "I know. We'll see where it goes." She smiled, small but real, and we stood there a minute, the ocean stretching out endless in front of us. Later, I watched them board the jet, quiet, reflective, changed. Lars waved from the cockpit, Franklin snapping one last photo, Gerald giving me a nod that felt like respect. Clara sat by the window, looking out at me as the engines roared. I stayed on the tarmac until they were gone, the jet a speck in the sky, then walked back to the gallery alone. Inside, I grabbed Gerald's note from my pocket, the one he'd slipped under my door, and pinned it to a board next to a printout of my first NFT sale, $500, 12 years ago. 2 pieces of my story, side by side. I stepped back, looking at them, then around at the space, the screens, the art, the empire I'd built in silence. They'd never forget me now, not after this. The jet, the island, the platform, it was all out there. Undeniable. I'd framed my past and my future, laid it bare for them to see. And as I walked out, the sun setting red over the water, I felt it. Freedom, real and solid, mine at last. The reunion was over, but my story? That was just getting started.